Hello, everybody, and welcome back to It's Not About the Money podcast. And I am incredibly excited today to be joined by Natalie MacNeil. She is an Emmy award-winning media entrepreneur, futurist, and business and leadership coach. She's the founder of Coaching Evolved, which is a transformational embodiment coaching certification, the only ICF accredited multi-modality certification of its kind. And if you've been a regular podcast listener, you will know the name Natalie MacNeil because Natalie is responsible for so much of my own personal evolution, spiritual evolution. I joined Natalie on Necker Island twice over the last 5 years. She's become a very good friend and mentor. And I am so excited to completely geek out with you guys today on the future of money. So welcome, Natalie, to the show. Thank you for joining me today.
Such a joy to be here. We always have such great conversations, and I think so many of them end with, wow, that would be a really great podcast episode, or other people need to be in on this conversation. So I love that other people get to be in on this conversation today. And
Yeah, me too.
hello,
And
listeners.
welcome. And I think on so many levels, I'm excited to have this conversation about the future of money. I definitely feel over the last 12 months, this real shift in energy, the shift away from the clearance work of clearing out trauma and money beliefs. And I've spoken a lot about that on the podcast recently about the importance of that piece, but also there is an excitement that I'm feeling right now that is moving away from those old stories, those old narratives, and into this really exciting, but also slightly terrifying future that is kind of emerging in front of our eyes that some of us don't even know what the future of money is going to be. So I really want to dive into some of these pieces and really using your visionary thoughts, Natalie, on exploring this topic around the future of money.
Yeah, same. And one of the things I love to share with people in this conversation is a story that my teacher, one of my teachers, Richard Rudd, who channeled and created the Gene Keys, likes to share is the story of the dragonfly, because I think this gives us a lot of foundational context and awareness for the rest of this conversation about how money is going to change, how the value of money is going to change. So, dragonflies start their lives as water nymphs. They are in the water and they have no idea what the world is like outside the water, right? Imagine being a water nymph and you're living your life in the water. Like you have no idea what's beyond that, let alone imagine flying through the air one day, right? Or being showed a glimpse of that reality. So one day the water nymph has this, impulse, and it's a biological function that starts to happen. And they climb up a reed, and then when they get out of the water, they start to split apart, split open, and they split open into the dragonfly. And their wings dry, and the water that they had been holding on to fills the wings, and they dry out, and then they're able to fly off into this whole new reality. And that's what I see us moving through right now. We are like the water nymphs, and what's going to be our reality in our lifetimes, like in the coming decades, we're going to have a moment where we realize, wow, especially if you've listened to this conversation and this is seated in you now, like, wow, I'm the dragonfly now. And the world is so different. My world flying through the sky is so different than my life was in the water. Like that's the kind of shift and leap that we are all about to experience. So if anything in this conversation today feels overwhelming or feels like there's a lot of steps to get there or it's a little bit confusing, that's okay. That's okay because you're the water nymph and the reality that you're moving into is a reality that's kind of beyond comprehension and beyond your wildest visions.
Mm, I love that description. And it reminds me as well of one of the pieces that Richard, and actually, I did a previous podcast episode about the gene keys and my own journey through the gene keys, and his explanation of the pearl and the significance of what the pearl represents in terms of money, which I won't go into detail on this episode, but it really made me think about how I feel like we're going from this world of individual wealth building to collective wealth building, and there being this big shift in the way that we even think about money. And I would love just to explore that piece with you initially in the work that you do and your own personal experiences of how you're feeling this shift from it being about what we're doing as individuals to what we're doing collectively and how that will shift the value of money.
Ooh. So I do believe that the future is much more community focused. And I think that's a big thing that we can all step more into as we get ready to move through some really big changes like artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, blockchain, crypto, it's all going to change absolutely everything. And then the convergence of all those trends happening at the same time, that is going to change everything. And when I think about some of the things that that's going to lead to, or some of the things that will be most supportive through this transition, community is definitely at the top of that list. And even if you think about the way that robots can potentially change everything, because the thing about robots that's really interesting in AI powered robots is that when robots can do anything, so when robots are able to create the things that humans were creating, and this is in so many different ways, from manufacturing, like taking over manufacturing, taking over production, taking over a lot of like laborious work, taking over even things like construction. Now, human labor capital, which is a huge part of GDP, starts to get driven down. And that brings us into this zero cost margin scenario. And what that means is that the cost to produce anything drops to nearly zero. So imagine getting almost everything done by machines for almost free, right? You could have a robot that can grow your food and prepare your food and even like build you things, even like build you a house or build you furniture, right? So as robots start replacing human labor, and this is a whole other thing that we could get into because I think that this brings in a lot of new forms of wealth that are going to potentially be developing as well. And like, how do we actually prepare for this? But one of the big things I think is community and focusing on being human. What does it mean to be human? And with robots and with AI able to replace us intellectually in so many ways, we'll never be able to keep up from an intellectual standpoint. It means that we need to focus more and more on being human. What that means, being with other humans, in community with other humans, and then co-creating together. And I think there are a lot of different ways that we can do that. And I want to also remind people, because I think depending on where we live in the world, this can be a radical concept. Like I grew up in Canada, which I would say is more community oriented than the United States, where I live now. And I've traveled to over 100 countries, so I've immersed myself in a lot of different cultures and spent time with a lot of different people. And there are already examples in the world where people essentially live off grid in community. That's something that happens in many, many places where money is a lot less valuable than it would be here where I am in Los Angeles. There's already a blueprint for this, and it's how we used to do things as well. Like we've always had to be in community. So I think it's a time right now to be returning to that. We can't do it
Mm.
alone. And I know that's a lot to drop, and there's like so many different tangents we can go on. So I don't know where you want to go next.
Well, what I find interesting from my stance is my experience with money has been very traditional. You know, having been through financial services for 20 years, giving my money to the banks for them to manage and look after. The piece that I find really interesting in what you've shared around co-creation and community is I think people are going to struggle with the trust element of this because it's going from I want to build more wealth for myself to let's build something together and let's not give it to the financial services industry to manage, the banks to manage. We're going to look after that ourselves. And I think there's a big trust piece in that. So I'm curious to know from that piece, do you
Mm.
think that people are going to struggle with trusting themselves with money?
So fiat currency, right, is kind of money backed by trust,
Mm,
right? It's not backed by gold like it used to be. Like fiat currency is backed by trust, and governments can print what they want. Like during a crises situations, they can print money. If you look at COVID and everything that unfolded there, um, trillions of dollars were printed during COVID, increasing the supply, but not the value, right? So we have all of these cycles that end up happening where it's like government prints money, prices rise, wages usually fall behind in that. People feel not as wealthy even if the number in their bank account is higher, there's like more of that feeling
mm,
of like contraction and like there's not enough.
mm.
And this is where decentralized finance starts to come in, which I really think is the next evolution. There's some really interesting legislation happening at the moment as well. And I bring this into the conversation because this brings in the community piece as well, or it's similar to the community piece. So decentralized finance is like, imagine you could be your own bank. Imagine there weren't all the middlemen, the in between, right? So if if I want to give money to you, or if you want to send money to me, or if we want to do a real estate transaction, I want to buy your home, look at all the intermediaries
Yeah. Oh my
that money
goodness.
goes through, right? I can't just as a business owner be like, oh, I'm going to buy a service from you, right? Without it costing money, without it costing all of these fees. And we're moving away from that with decentralized finance, which is going to change a lot. So you won't need a bank, you won't need a broker that are charging fees, that are setting rules. And the new economy and where finance is going to be built on blockchains, and it's going to use smart contracts, they're called, instead of using a banker or instead of using a lawyer if we're doing like a real estate transaction, or something that requires a contract like that. So you're going to be able to lend and borrow and trade and earn interest with a digital wallet. And this is already happening. Like decentralized finance has been catching on in a big way, including with institutions, because people want more control over their money and they want higher yields than traditional banks and they want more transparency as well. So this is all unfolding right now too. And with the decentralization, there are also decentralized autonomous organizations where a DAO, as they're called, this is community run. This is not like one person or one organization that is controlling everything.
Hmm.
It's controlled, quote unquote, by multiple people. And so I think this is the model of the future, like returning to more of a council model, returning more to like a circular model, having circles the way that many indigenous peoples have done. And so it's not going to be one central figure or one central organization that's controlling something. It's really returning the power to people and to groups. And I really believe that this is going to be a major part of the next 50 years and something for all of us to be very aware of. And I even think about it in terms of how I'm structuring my business. And I think this goes back to the question that you were asking. It's like collaboration. It's time for collaboration. How can we be working together, not working on our own? How can we be finding the people who we resonate with, who we feel like a heart resonance with, and people who match our energy and our values? And how can we weave with those people
Mm.
to create more equity in the world, to create more beauty in the world, to start to create these new systems and these new paradigms together.
Mm.
And I think eventually we get there even with cities. I think cities of the future could potentially be run more by councils. I do think we'll see a return to that. I don't know if in the next 50 years, but again, I think we're moving into a dragonfly scenario where things are going to speed up so fast. Time is going to feel like it's moving so fast. Things will change so quickly that it's possible that in 50 years we even have radically different leadership structures.
Yeah, I think there are already some countries that are doing this. Even in Switzerland, for example, I was chatting to a friend of mine just last week in Zurich, and they have these collective political decisions that they make for the country and for each individual town in that country, and the power is handed back to the people, not the constitutions. And I think that we're going to see this same movement with money. What I'm curious to hear actually is, what do you think are the biggest opportunities as entrepreneurs in this new financial landscape?
Great question. And I think this brings in the crisis. It kind of feels like a bit of a crisis, or it's like the mucky parts that we have to go through that a lot of people aren't ready for. Because as we have the rise of AI, as we have robots that are replacing human labor, it means that the value of human labor goes down, right? And then there's this new form of wealth that starts to emerge. And it's that wealth won't come from a job that you have, it will come from having ownership in the machines and the AI that are actually doing the work. And I actually saw a really interesting example of this of this yesterday with Tesla. So Tesla's building out robo taxis. We have this all over LA now. Like people use Waymo. you call a car, the car picks you up and it doesn't have a driver, right? Like this
So
is
weird.
in big cities, at least here, this is already happening. People are doing driverless cars. They just announced that for the 2028 Olympics, they would have the Uber flying vehicles as well. So those are already being tested here. So you'll actually be able to be taken in a flying vehicle to where you need to go, and it's all powered by robotics and automation and AI, and there will not be a driver of that vehicle. So that's an interesting example of capital ownership with the Tesla robotaxis in particular, because they plan on selling those to people. So in a couple years from the time that we're recording this, you can buy a robotaxi that essentially goes out and works. Like right now, I have my Tesla in my garage and it's just sitting in the garage, and I'm here on this interview. My Tesla could be out working right now and earning money, but it's not because we don't have the robo taxis yet. But that's coming. That's coming very soon. And these are these are the things that start to matter. Capital ownership starts to matter more than ever. So owning crypto that's powering these networks like Ethereum and Bitcoin and other tokens, owning pieces of the AI and the robotics companies, owning stakes in decentralized platforms. So those decentralized autonomous organizations that I'm talking about, many of them are connected to a crypto, a token as well. So I think if you don't own capital in the future that
Mm.
we're moving towards, you are essentially renting your life from someone else. And that's what I personally don't want to be doing. And so I've been freeing myself from that in the ways that I can right now. And
What kind of things have you been doing to free yourself?
so I started investing in crypto pretty long ago. And I went to a very entrepreneurial and technical university. And it's the university that the founder of Ethereum was at. And at the time that I was in school, because I graduated in 2008, so there was a lot of talk about this decentralized future among the techies that I went to school with, and the Bitcoin white paper had come out, and that was a big turning point as well. So I ended up learning a lot about crypto pretty early on, and so that is one way. Also, the way that I invest is not so traditional, as you and I have talked about on many occasions. Like, I really invest in the future that I'm seeing unfolding and looking at where are we 10 years from now, and how does my portfolio reflect an alignment with what we're moving towards. And I've been pretty right in that so far, and I invest in the trends that I'm seeing and in robotics and automation companies, in AI companies. So that's another way to have, again, ownership in this future. And then the other thing that I think a lot about is what and I've heard a few people refer to it in this way or in a similar way, but I like to call it a low burn digital life. So, how do I try to create as much location independence as I can? And how do I live in a very, what I consider a responsible way? I've always been pretty responsible with money because that was my childhood conditioning as well, which is a whole other story. But money was very tight growing up. And so I learned that very early on to save a lot and to not overspend. And so I I like to have this low burn life and try to keep a lot of things digital as well. And digital meaning also investing in digital currencies, having things online, and that factors into a lot of the decisions that I make as well. And how can I live off of that so that I don't have to be working for money? That's something that I think about a lot as
Mm.
well. How can I make sure that my digital assets are productive ones? And, crypto has performed very, very well. There's staking and there's pretty high interest rates that you can earn from that too. So those are the kinds of things that I do to prepare.
I just love this conversation so much because I know that so many of my listeners are going to be very versed in the traditional ways of saving money and investing and building their own personal wealth, which have all been driven by the traditional ways, right? And I feel like some people might be listening to this thinking, "Oh my God, I have none of that. Like, I just have money in the bank and I've maybe invested in my pensions and done all the things that, people have told me to do." And I just think that it is a radical change. And with that comes many opportunities, but also comes many risks. And it's something that I don't hear a lot of people talking about either, is the risks of going down this digital age because we are very limited in our financial education. And so, having considered the opportunities, what would you say would be some of the biggest risks or maybe some gentle warnings that people should also consider?
Yeah, I feel like you probably have a lot to add to this part of the conversation too. So definitely jump in and I'd love to hear your perspective. I also want to say having this conversation with your audience and people who are more down the traditional path of finance feels a little risky. And I just invite you to keep an open mind. And I'm in no way advocating that pull money out of where you've already been following through on a financial strategy and plan for yourself and to just, put it all into
Natalie
cryptocurrency.
said, go put it all into crypto. No, no,
No,
no.
don't
Which is
do
why
that.
this
Don't
question
do
is
that.
important. This is why this is important, right? Because this isn't
Yes.
a case of just pull everything out of traditional and go all in on futuristic digital currencies. It's just about understanding the opportunities. And we can, maybe talk about ways that people can start to move towards that as well.
Yes, and my current portfolio, just for full disclosure, is around 15% in crypto is kind of the allocation that I keep at the moment. So it's considered to be a pretty high allocation. Mm, I've heard financial advisors who do integrate crypto into clients' portfolios usually do it at like a 2 to 3% allocation is
Yeah.
what I'm often hearing about. So 15% is still high, but I'm in no way like all in on it and still have my other investments as well.
And
Like
age is relevant too.
age
If you're
relevant
in your
too.
50s, you're looking to draw on assets in the next few years, then your ability to tolerate risks is going to be very different to someone in their 20s and 30s.
Yes. And I think what the other big risks are is even though there's transparency in blockchain systems, the fact that it is decentralized can also mean that there's a higher risk of scams,
Mm.
of there being no action that you can take if something does happen. That's why you want to make sure that you're working with trusted exchanges. This is why regulation matters. And we're finally having those conversations now, and this is being more regulated. So I think we'll end up in more of an in-between space of we're moving away from the traditional centralized system, but there's going to be this in between from like full on uh, free and
Normalizing.
open blockchain systems where it's kind of the wild, wild west. Like I think we're going to settle in this in between, especially as governments start to adopt more stable coins and even sometimes incorporate Bitcoin into their overall financial strategies too. So I think that regulatory piece is really important so that there is still consumer protection because that is really essential.
And I think that's just a little note on that. Like, I think the fact that we have Trump in power, like not to go down the political conversation here, but the fact that we have him in presidency, the fact that a lot of corporates are moving their pension funds into these digital currencies, that already indicates a lot of confidence, more confidence than I think we were even like 2 years ago. You know, that like it wasn't even really on my landscape as a financial professional until like 2 years ago. So I do think that the more market sentiment and the confidence that's coming in the corporates and definitely has an impact on, the herd mentality of people following the crowds and what everybody else is doing. So
Yes.
but yes, it is important to consider the risks as well. So you're holding 15% in your portfolio right now. I hold about 5%. My son, who's 11, has 100%. He's just taken, well, he's like 50-50 cash, and then he's just opened up his own ledger account, which he's very excited about on our platform. And he's diving into this already, which I think is really exciting to think about how we're educating the future generations. Are you talking about me? And yeah, he's just stepped into the room and said, "Are you talking about me?" Yes, we.
No, way to go. Great decisions you're making. And yeah, for the younger ones, like for my niece and nephew too, I'm investing in crypto for them because I really think this is where we're going in the future. And it is a really interesting time, especially with administration, legislation that's happening.
Yeah, all the boring stuff, which in reality is going to protect us and help us, but is probably not something we're generally that interested in. Um, but I think on the risk side, like, is there anything that you think is important to share from a, we've looked at the opportunities, but what might be some of the risks that people should be aware of?
Well, I think what I see a lot of people do is jump in and buy altcoins that are not productive assets and that aren't built on real value. And I see that as a major risk when people are getting into cryptocurrencies. So I would recommend looking at the coins with real value and with longevity and with amazing teams that are developing technology that I think will power the future as well. So that's more what I like to look at. Don't fall for the scams and the valueless meme coins, and really do your research on the exchange that you're going to buy through. So make sure that it's one that follows rules and regulations of the country it's operating in. In the United States, I use Coinbase, also Kraken for some secondary transactions. And those are things that I look at a lot. You can even consider moving to a cold storage where you take your crypto off of the exchange and you hold it in what's called a cold wallet so that it's offline.
Yeah. For anyone who's not heard of these type of coins, could you just describe, like if you were talking to my 11-year-old, to help him understand like meme coins, altcoins, what do these coins mean?
Ooh, let's see if I can do this in a simplified
No pressure.
simplified
We're going to put
way.
it in the English dictionary after we've talked about this.
Yeah, because they are all a little bit different. But for example, with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is capped. It's a hard cap at 21 million coins. So that limited supply is what creates a lot of the value in Bitcoin. And so that's a little different than now we have these other coins that are created on different networks. Pretty much anybody can what we call mint a coin. Like if I want to I can create my own decentralized autonomous network, and I can choose to create a currency that is the currency of my personal network. So this is interesting from the community perspective, right? Because as a community, you could choose to, and some communities have done this already. You
Mm.
can say, in this particular community, we're building our own little economy, and this is going to be the currency of our little economy here.
The
And so,
Natalie MacNeil coin.
yeah, I wouldn't I wouldn't call
No,
it
we would come up with something better than that.
by name, but like, let's say we create this fictitious community, and it's like, there's actually one, there are some being created here that is really, really interesting. Like one here in the US, and they've been talking about doing this. But let's just say that we're calling it Future Coin. Sorry, I'm not in my like
The
name
collective,
brain right
well,
now.
let's take the collective visionary coin.
Okay, great. We'll call it Vision Coin for now. If anyone else owns the trademark, by the
Yeah,
way, Vision Coin, like we're not doing a trademark search right now.
no
We're not
affiliates or
actually
sponsorship.
moving forward with taking your coin. But if we have, let's say we have Vision Coin, and we're in this community of visionaries, and now our Vision Coin is distributed equally amongst the people who are in that group. So the community is owned by everyone who's in the group, and it's owned by them because they own the currency, the coin of that group. Now, they could also sell that. They could sell that as an asset. There can be things that are bought and sold with that particular coin. So you create your own mini economy within a much larger economy. Now, here's where there can be scams, and there have been scams that happen because people mint coins that don't have any real value because they're not built on something that people get that's valuable in exchange for holding this coin. And these are the meme coins that are just kind of created and put out there. And sometimes they take off, but people are taking a huge risk there.
Yeah.
Versus when you're investing in something that, for example, Solana is a coin that has built very groundbreaking technology for decentralized finance and allows for transactions on the Solana network to be very fast, like for people to be sending money to each other. It can still be a little bit expensive. So now there are other competitors, like Sui is another one that has a faster and cheaper technology that they've built. And this is like peer-to-peer transaction technology that is super valuable. So buying into those coins and those systems is essentially investing in the financial structures and systems of the future. And then with things like Ethereum and with Solana and with some of these other platforms, you can go and you can choose to work on that platform, and you can mint your own coin. So like I could choose to build my own community onto Ethereum, use Ethereum's underlying technology, but I could mint my own coin. Or if I was on Solana, I could do that. I could mint my own coin, but it's still connected to the Solana network.
Yeah.
I, I don't know if I explained that well.
Yeah,
It
you
is a
did.
complicated thing to try and explain.
And it is, I think, to get your head around, well, what do you mean that this isn't just like I have £100,000 in a bank account? This is like something that is being created, that is community ownership. It's not controlled by banks. It's decentralized. Like it is weird, right? Maybe not for some of us because we've been having these conversations for a few years, but especially for you since early 2000s, but I think for a lot of people, this is a new conversation. And I love the fact that we are two women having this conversation. So many of these conversations happen in the boardrooms and they happen in male groups. And I think one of the things that I get excited about is the fact that we know as women that we do like to invest alongside our values and ethically. And I know this is something you talk about in terms of AI and using AI ethically, but I get excited to think about, well, actually, we are moving into a world where more women are holding more wealth than ever before. And with that comes a complete change. And it also presents opportunities where we are changing the financial landscape for our future generations. And I think that I am, as a woman, teaching my two boys how to invest and how to, carefully consider their investment portfolios. So I think that piece is interesting to think about the ethics and the value, value-based investing. How important is that for you as an investor?
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot because I want to be investing in the world that I see is possible. And
Mm,
part of that is looking at sustainability programs, for example, that an organization is working on when it comes to crypto. I'm looking at the companies that are focused on their environmental impact. How do we lower the environmental impact of crypto? Like these are things that I'm constantly thinking about. And I think we all have a responsibility, first of all, to know our own values. And I still work with a lot of people. It's one of the things I do in my leadership and business coaching, where I can ask people what their values are. And a lot of people can't name their top five values. So I think doing that deeper work and doing this embodiment work, like getting to know yourself, your truth, what's important to you, is also a big part of where we're going. And I think that when you're connected to that, you're also less likely, I think, to get pulled into some of the things that are like not as transparent. Like if you're in your embodiment and your values and you are listening and you're in your discernment, then
mm,
I think you'll end up investing in the things that are creating real value and that are driving us forward towards progress and to a more equitable world. Like there's one more thing that I wanted to say actually about cryptocurrency and decentralized finance and what we're moving towards, which is the tokenization of assets. I think this is a really important thing for everybody to know about. And there are companies that are actively doing this right now. And what that means is something like a house would be a token. So real world assets being attached to a digital token so that it's much easier to do transactions. That if I wanted to do a transaction with you and sell you my house, I could do that without, I think here there's like 8 different places you have to go to, like 8 different intermediaries to go and get the right paperwork and,
yeah, mortgage
transfer the
advisors and estate
all
agents and
all
all
the things,
that.
right? And you end up paying like tens of thousands of dollars in like fees and closing costs and everything to make this transaction. We're moving to a future where these assets are associated with tokens where we'll be able to exchange those on our own. So I think that's another way that we can start to think
Mm,
about what we're moving towards. And for me, that is more ethical. Like there's a lending platform, Ave, where we can collectively lend money to people, and they're trying to make loans more accessible to groups that historically have been excluded from being able to access capital and being able to access loans. And we can collectively offer a loan. We could choose to put in like $1, right, towards somebody else's loan that's
mm.
put transparently on blockchain. Like those are the things that are possible to invest in that I do see as being values driven investing as well. It just
Yeah,
looks
I
different
love that.
from the traditional values based investing.
I love that. And I feel like there's so many things I want to dive into around
We
and
could be on here for 4 hours.
I know. So, okay, what I would love to dive into is some of the practical ways that people can start to think about, contemplate, actually go and do when it comes to moving their money, maybe some of their beliefs as well, around this. But before we go into the practical, I just have a question around the ethical piece because I know, for example, one of the ways that I've spoken about before on the show is around how you can start to do this straight away. Once you've got an idea as to what your values are, if you know, for example, that like justice is one of my highest values, and I know this about myself because every time I see something that is unjust in the world, it's about the only time that you would see me physically like want to stand up and shout, like, what the hell are you doing? This is not just, right? And so when I think about my investment portfolio, I'm like, well, maybe I want to weed out some of the what we would call sin stocks, companies that may invest in pornography or tobacco or arms manufacturing. And you can do that within your pension funds and your investment funds from a very practical perspective by, switching your funds into some ethical based investment strategies. So I think from a practical perspective, that's something that people can do very easily without even necessarily going down into the digital world, and some of the things that we've spoken about already. Um, and I feel like you had something to say just
There
there
was
on that.
there was a tool that I think you had recommended. There was another one that I was using that I'm now forgetting the name of. Do you remember the name of the tool that
The
was able to
platform.
scan your, yes, that can scan your portfolio? Like I have guiding questions that I ask myself, like whether an investment supports the future that I want to live in. Does it help people become more free and conscious? Is it regenerative or is it extractive? And I know that there are tools that can also filter these things for you.
There's quite a few actually. I'll pop some into the show notes of this episode because I think depending on where you live depends on which platforms are going to support you better. But even a lot of the investment platforms now, if you're using the likes of, in the UK, Hargreaves Lansdown, companies like that, they do have a lot of ethical screening information, and that you can also just download your fund fact sheet and put it through an AI project that you've created in ChatGPT or in Claude, and just ask it, can you screen my portfolio and tell me how this money is invested in alignment with my values? I've done that for several clients. It's fascinating because it's so subjective as well. But I will pop a link in the show notes to some of the research-based websites that you can actually go and find out more information around as well.
Yeah, I think that's so great for all of us to be thinking in this way. Like I look at my money as a prayer. Like my money is a prayer. There's like a sacredness to it. And so I really think about where that's going, and it's definitely not, it's not perfect. Like there are things that I'm invested in that surely I would go through and be like, "Oh, this fund is invested in this one company that's in that fund I don't like." But for the most part, when I'm investing in companies, it's something that I'm really thinking about. And I think even small moves make a really big difference too. I don't think we have to move our money all at once. Like, for example, I've been moving some of my ETF investments into a sustainable and more impact focused
Mhm.
fund. And I didn't do it all at once. I didn't like sell my whole portfolio of ETFs and move it all into these other three ETFs. It's something that I look at moving a little bit at a time.
Yeah,
So
that's a great suggestion.
yeah, like you don't have to do it all at once. It's more doing the work to even discover your values and what's important to you, and then researching the projects on whether it's decentralized finance projects or researching the companies and looking at whether they're in alignment for you, working with AI to see if they're in alignment with you and then moving from that place. But you don't have to move really quickly.
Yeah,
Which
100%.
yeah.
Yeah,
In
for
baby.
sure. Are there any particular resources that you found useful in your own financial education of these discussions?
That's such a great question. I feel like there are so many potential resources. And I do think that today AI can support you a lot with understanding these things. Like you could have ChatGPT build you your own course to learn about decentralized finance. So you could go in and say, act as a specialist in decentralized finance that helps people who are invested in traditional finance to start to move towards decentralized finance and a decentralized future. I'm somebody who tell it a little bit about yourself, your background, how you invest, and then say, can you create a 10-part mini course for me that guides me into understanding cryptocurrency, blockchain, and decentralized finance in a simple way and help me to start investing there for the future. And then it can create you your own little mini course with additional resources and books that you could dive into that's very much aligned with the specific things that you want to learn.
I love that. I'm literally going to take that piece of the recording. That's going to be my prompts for my investment manager. But actually, I did do this, and not quite that prompt. But one of the things that my husband and I did recently is we took all of our financial documents, we like took out all of our personal information, and we went into an AI project. We set it up as an investment manager, and we did spend a lot of time feeding it with information. This is something you can do. And if you're not sure how to do this, I know Natalie has an AI Dream Team course, which does talk through like how to go and create your own custom GPTs. And it was brilliant because we were like, we want to shift into some crypto and Bitcoin, etc., but we're not really 100% sure how to do that. This is our current asset allocation. This is how our money's already invested. Can you just start to ask us some questions for us to consider how we could maybe move some of this money? And what it did help us to understand is the importance of allocating very specific financial goals to your money, right? Because if you are investing for your children's university fees in 2 years' time, very different approach to risk and investments, compared to things that will be much later down the line. So it was super helpful to just have someone to have the conversation with who can pull on resources, to help us. And I think even more so in the future, AI is going to be so important to help us manage the emotional aspects of making decisions about, do I sell? Everyone's talking about Bitcoin's going to explode, or like, do you find that as well for yourself? Do you find that from an emotional perspective, that's going to play an important part of how AI can help us?
Totally, because if AI is powering your investments, then it won't sell, right? It will sell strategically and not not make any emotional decisions. And that's something that I've built into my custom GPT. So I have two financial advisor custom GPTs that I built. One is on ChatGPT, the other is on Google's Gemini. And I do find that the Gem, which is the equivalent of a custom GPT that I built on Gemini, is better overall. It's performed better. So
Oh,
I think it's just, I find that with a lot of financial stuff, Gemini performs better, and you can export directly to Sheets. And so
mhm.
it deals with data and financial information in a way that I've just found superior at this point in time to
Yeah.
ChatGPT. And that being said, it changes literally every day. AI is changing every day. It's a lot to keep up with. And by the time you're listening to this, I'm open to being wrong on that. But as of this moment in this recording, Gemini is a really great tool for exactly this. And I've trained my gem, my custom GPT, to to give this exact information, like to give the emotional
Mm.
forecasting of everything as well, to bring in the fear and greed index, to look
Yes.
at overall sentiment. And it's really interesting because I get sent a daily update that is generated by my custom GPT. So it gives me my morning update with any earnings and anything that's come out on any of my holdings that I should be aware of. It gives me the current market sentiment, and it will,
Daily.
yeah,
Wow.
I get it daily at 7 a.m. because it's what I like to look at in the morning. I do a little bit of trading too, so I've got my long-term investment.
Female Warren Buffett. I can see you
And
with
I've got my
paper. You're like going
I
into
read.
tea.
I read so much, but it's so helpful to have AI now because I used to be that geek who was like, I wanted to listen to the earnings calls and I wanted to I wanted to go through all the data. Now AI goes through all the data and AI transcribes and summarizes the earning calls for me. And that's really cool. So I get sent my daily digest and it will also say, by the way, today on the Fear and Greed Index, we're only at a number 3, which has
Bonus.
happened at very few points in history, which means that we are in peak fear. And reminder, do not descend into the fear. Stay focused. So you can have it build in little um, cues like that that can be really, really helpful.
I love that. I feel like daily would be a bit too much for my nervous system, but
I love the daily tracking. Maybe it's a little too much for me as well, but it is something I really enjoy doing. Like
yeah,
I get excited on days where economic data is being released. I'm super excited. Like I'll go to bed at night and I'll turn to my partner and I'm like, "Oh, the inflation report comes out at 8 a.m. Like can't wait for that." And he's like, "You are such a nerd."
this is
Like this
part of
is
the foreplay conversation.
economic data.
Whoop,
I
whoop.
nerd out on so many things
We are
like
so
that.
different. We are so, so different. It's so funny. But this a great place to finish. It's like there will be parts of this that you want to geek out with and get very practical with. And for sure, like definitely, I would definitely suggest embracing the use of AI to help to support you in your own financial education. Um, and I will pop a link in the show notes as well to Natalie's course, which helps to understand about how you can build out these different roles using AI. But I also think that there is a lot of, some of you listening to this may be feeling a little bit unsure, a bit confused. Like it's totally fine. It's totally normal as we move into this new paradigm to be questioning things, challenging things. So I think it is important to understand and educate yourself as much as you can. And certainly for our children, financial education is going to be hugely different in 5 years' time to how it has been. So I'm excited for that. Very, very excited for that.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's so important that you're planting this seed. It's going out, it's continuing to learn about some of the things that we're talking about, start engaging with AI as well. I do think that's really important for where we're going and look at how you can step into that capital ownership of this future that's unfolding before us and
mm,
have ChatGPT create you your own mini course. And the one other thing is I think the spiritual aspect, because these are some of the things that are unfolding
mm,
physically. And I think that this is also bringing a lot of spiritual growth and awakening as well. And I think those are very interconnected. So I think learning more about yourself and who you are and learning about things like the gene keys and exploring that, like exploring your unique soul blueprint. Now
mm,
is the time for that too, because with robots able to replace a lot of human labor, that means that we have a lot more time freed up.
mm,
The future is really moving towards abundance from scarcity. We're going through this massive shift in that sense. So, how can you step into embodying more abundance? And how can you really start to understand who you are and understand what it means to you to be human and to have this human experience and to understand what's your purpose beyond work? If you had all the time in your life to just spend it exactly as you wish, what would you choose to do with that time? And I believe that some of these deeper questions, philosophical questions, are
Now
just
you're
as
talking.
important, yeah, are just as important as asking yourself how you can prepare your portfolio for what might be coming.
Yeah, now you're talking my vibes. Like, how do we prepare our minds, our bodies, our souls? How do we prepare all of that first? Because there's a level of acceptance with this too, right? Is that this is happening. It is happening right in front of our eyes. And I think if we can move with that, then we're going to be able to feel more trusting of ourselves to be able to create this new world. It's just
Yeah.
so exciting. So yeah, I'm so glad you've mentioned the spiritual aspect, which I also feel like is a whole nother episode we could dive into
I could
together.
dive so deep into all of that. Yes, like your own embodiment and your self-trust, exactly, your sovereignty
Yeah.
and your beingness, and let your beingness inspire all the actions that you then take and what you choose to do with this information and with being able to have this glimpse of what we're moving towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And these old philosophies are coming back through, and I love the fact that we're going back through these old philosophies and then blending in this new human AI experience as well. It just feels like such a different world, but it really excites me blending those two things together. So
We're
I'm
becoming
very
wise.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to just have this conversation with you today, Natalie. If anybody would like to come and geek out with you on this conversation, where would be a good place for them to come and find you?
Yes, you can find me at Natalie MacNeil on Instagram. I love hearing from people. I love hearing what your biggest takeaways from the episode was. And then nataliemacneil.com, you can find me there and explore all the things that we offer. We have a future focused newsletter as well that you can sign up for there. nataliemacneil.com/newsletter will take you there as well. And if you want my weekly insights on everything that's unfolding and how to stay prepared for it, I think that's also a good place to come and check out. And maybe we'll have to have a follow-up conversation here as well so that we can dive into so many more layers of this.
100%. Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing in all of your wisdom. I think that you are a magnificent person to be holding this conversation because, you are a true visionary and you blend so much of the somatics, the embodiments, the theory, the strategy. Like, I've never seen a mind pull all of these pieces together in such a wonderful way. And so I just feel, I know that anyone listening to this is going to have taken so much away from this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us, Natalie. And I will speak to you guys again next Monday. I feel like I'm going to record another episode just to like debrief with you on some of these pieces as well. So look forward to that coming. And remember that this is about you stepping into being your own money visionary. So, with that, I will see you again on the show next week. Thanks, guys.